In this video, I'm going to show you how I went about drawing a still life from real life, rather than just a photo. So for this process, you're going to need a 2B pencil, an eraser, a pencil sharpener will be handy, and a ruler. Now set up 2 or 3 simple rounded objects on a box to elevate them, so that you're not looking too much down on all of your items. So maybe put a white page underneath, and if you can, a white page behind, so there's no distractions. Now look at your objects. What I'm doing here is I'm looking at the height of the objects and the width of the objects. So I'm going to do mine in a portrait format because it's higher than it is wide. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my basic unit of measurement. To do this, I'm going to keep my arm nice and straight and I keep the pencil vertical. I close one eye and I decide what I'm going to use my basic unit of measurement on, and in this case I'm going to use the candle. So I line the top of the pencil up with the top of the candle, and I move my finger down the pencil until it comes to the bottom of the candle, and this is going to be my basic unit of measurement. Now when I draw it on the page, it can be taught more than what I saw by eye, but whatever I do now, this length of line is what I'm going to compare every other line in the drawing from. So once I have that established, what I'm doing now is I'm just very roughly mapping in the main shapes of the objects. In this case, for the candle, it's just a rectangle. I'm just making sure I've got my lines straight. I'm not going to be too fussy about getting it right now. It's just mapping it in, putting my central axis point in, or axis line in. And now I'm going to look at the cup. So if I look at the cup in comparison to the candle, the cup comes about 3/4 way up that candle. Alright, so now I've seen that I was about to draw too low, so I'm going to adjust that. If that's halfway, that's about 3/4 way up that candle. So I'm going to put the top of the cup at this point. Alright, so I'm just seeing how wide the cup is in comparison to the height of that candle, which is my basic unit of measurement. And that cup is about 3/4 the height of the candle, which means my basic unit of measurement, let's say it was 1, that line going across would be 3/4. So I judge about what 3/4 is, and I just make a little mark there. And I put my line going across. And now I'm just going to maybe drop it a small little bit so that you draw lightly to start with, because you will be adjusting your drawing. So now I'm just putting in the basic shapes, and I've seen that I did my cup too far away. If I look at that negative space between the cup and the candle, I realised that I was beginning to draw my cup too far away, so I'm going to bring it in a bit. And again, this is why we draw lightly. And I've also noticed the cup is further down on the, what I'm calling the table, than the candle. It's in front of it a bit, so I'm making sure that I put the bottom of that cup a little bit below the bottom of that candle. What I'm doing now is I'm just checking the width of that candle compared to its height. So the width of it, it's roughly half the unit of measurement, which means it's about half as wide as it is tall. So if that's the unit of measurement, it should be, the halfway out should be about there. So I'm just going to widen that candle a little bit. So this is why you do your basic unit of measurement. You can measure everything else from it. It takes a little bit of practice to get used to doing this, but it's a trick that artists use to make sure that they have everything in place. So when I moved my line over, I noticed that my central axis line was now in the wrong position, so I just had to change that. Now I'm going to come back to my cup. I'm going to put the central axis line in here so I can judge if the left-hand side of the cup is the same as the right. And you'll notice I'm continuously moving around my drawing as well. I'm constantly adjusting things as I go. And I just want to make sure I have enough room on the right hand side of that cup for the handle. Now let's look at that little bowl in the front. So basically what that bowl is just an elliptical shape. It's a circle on its side. Now we're going to talk about ellipses more in a little while. But for now, just with a very loose pencil, what you want to do is you don't want a circle, you're not looking straight down as you want an ellipse, so it's kind of like a squashed circle. So just very lightly put that in. I'm noticing that it's overlapping the front of the cup and a little bit of the candle. And now I'm just going to map in the back of what I'm calling my table. Okay, and now I'm just going to rub out any excess marks so I can see what I'm doing. Now if I look at this bowl again, I've realised maybe I haven't drawn it far far over enough. So I'm just going to adjust that. So again, draw lightly to start with. You will be constantly adjusting things. And at this stage, I'm just mapping in. I'm not even drawing yet. I'm just trying to make sure I have everything in the right position on the table. This is an important step, and you should take time in your drawing to do this, especially when you're drawing from life, because it is harder than drawing from a photograph. Alright, so I'm going to look at those and I'm making sure that I'm happy with the placement of them in relation to each other, the size and where they are in the page. I'm just going to fix up any little bits there. So let's talk about ellipses. So when you look at a circle straight on, it becomes a circle, but as you move it away from you, the circle becomes smaller and more squished and becomes more elliptical until it gets to a certain point where if you're looking at the circle, or let's say the edge of a cup or an egg cup straight on, you'll just see a straight line. So this means that when things are at your eye level, they're a straight line, but as they move below your eye level a bit, they become elliptical. And the further down below the eye level they are, the more roundy and elliptical they are. So let's get the ellipse on this. What I'm going to do, because this one is nearly at my eye level, I'm going to put a little mark where the top of the ellipse is going to be and a little mark where the bottom of the ellipse is going to be. I'm putting this on my central axis line. Now, this is going to take practice, guys, and you might need to practice this on a separate page. But what I'm going to do now is with a loose arm, I'm going to draw that ellipse. Now, make sure you don't put corners on your ellipses. Ellipses do not have corners. They have rounded edges. Okay, so you're going to have to practice doing that round. So it's a circle on its side, it's rounded edges. Keep your arm nice and loose when you're doing this. Okay, so I've got my 4 points in, at the top, the bottom, and the two sides, and now I'm just going to, with a nice loose arm, use those 4 points as my guide to fill in that ellipse. Now it might take a few times, and it will take practice. This is not easy, but once you get it, it will help your drawings become more realistic. Okay, so I think that's about right. I'll check my object that's in front of me to make sure I haven't made my ellipse too deep. And that looks all right. And I'm just doing the back rim of the candle there. Now, if I do the bottom of the candle, what we're going to do is we're just going to draw through that bowl. We're going to pretend the bowl is see-through for the moment because it's good to have the full drawing to work from. I'm going to mark the top and the bottom of my ellipse, and because it's a bit lower down, the ellipse is going to be a bit deeper, which means that those little marks on the top and bottom are further away from each other, and that ellipse will be more rounded. It'll be deeper. So now I join up my 4 points, keeping the edges nice and rounded. And I judge my item that's in front of me to see am I happy with that. And when I am, I can rub out the part which is actually blocked by that bowl. But put them in first to start with because it's easier to draw an ellipse when you have the object in. You can rub out anything afterwards, let's say if it's blocked by something else. Now I'm just going to fix up that line there. So constantly fixing up and adjusting things as you go. And I notice that I actually need to bring that cup over even another little bit. That negative space is telling me that I need to bring that cup over another little bit. So that's why we look at things like negative spaces. Okay, so because I've moved over the cup a little bit, it means I have to move my central axis line. So make sure that's in the centre of my object. I map that in. Again, the drawing is still very rough at this stage, and that's okay. You're still only mapping in. So don't be too worried about rubbing out every single mistake or mark that you make. Just enough that you can see what you're doing. Now I'm going to put the points in the top and the bottom for the ellipse, and because it's a little bit below the top of the candle, it's going to be deeper than the top of the candle, but not as deep as the bottom of the candle. But to always judge by what's actually in front of you, because the cup is quite open on the top, it is a deep ellipse in this instance. So I'm swooping around between those 4 points on my axis. Now I'm going to do the bottom of the cup, and because the bottom of the cup is actually below the candle, but below the bottom of the candle, that ellipse is going to be deeper again. It's going to be more circular. So when I put, and I also noticed my bowl was a little bit too far over, so I'm just moving that a little bit roughly, making sure of my central axis line in. So at the top and bottom of my ellipse, and I've got my 2 corners, holding my pencil nice and loose, I'm going to swoop between those 4 points to make a nice rounded shape. And you'll notice it's more roundy than the bottom of the candle by a little bit. It's only a little bit, but it is because it's a little bit more below your eye level than the bottom of the candle. It is a little bit more roundy. So remember, things become more circular as you go below your eye level. Now let's have a look at that bowl. So because I'm looking at the bowl, you see in front of the cup, it's even more below my eye level. So what I want to do is fix up the position of that a little bit. And I'm going to put my central axis line in. And I'm going to see how wide it is. So I'm going to put the marks in the right and the left of my object. And then the top and the bottom of the ellipse, making sure that my right and my left are correct. Now I'm going to do the top and the bottom of the ellipse. Now you can see that it's wider again than the cup because it's a little lower down. And again, I join those 4 points up. And I always refer to what's in front of me to see, is that opening looking right? And then for the bottom of the bowl, keep that kind of line, maybe just a tiny bit more, but it's more or less the same. So just keep that swoop. And you can rub out then all your excess marks, fixing everything up as you go. Now I'm drawing a little bit heavier so you can see the drawing on the page, on the video. But when you're drawing, keep your marks nice and light. Now let's look at that handle. So to start off with, I judge how far up the cup the handle comes. So it's quite close to the top, so I'm going to put a mark there. And how far down the cup the handle comes, so I'm just going to put a mark there. Now judging how far out it comes from the cup by using my basic unit of measurement, I'm eyeballing it. So I'm just going to put the shape in lightly first. And now for the inside of the handle, I'm going to look at that negative space. So not the handle, but the space behind the handle. And I'm using that to get the shape of the handle correct. And then I'm just going to do the rim of the handle there, just map that in. So that's the inside of the handle there, and that's the outside of the handle. And I just make sure I have my table mapped in correctly. You can go through your objects at this stage because you haven't started shading in yet, and it's just an easier way to draw your table, just putting a line straight through and then rubbing out the excess marks. Again, I'm adjusting things as I go. And as I said, I'm drawing heavy so you can see, but your drawings will be lighter at this stage. And I think I'm happy with that. Okay, so what we'll do is, if you go away and set up your own objects, keep them rounded and simple, and practice drawing objects from real life. Good luck, enjoy.